5 shocking stories of feral children. While we're familiar with the stories of Tarzan and Mowgli from the Jungle Book, in real life there are parallel stories of actual children being raised by wild animals or sometimes left entirely to fend for themselves. The stories on this list are extreme cases from these kinds of individuals. These are 5 shocking stories of feral children. Number 5. Marina Chapman. She could feel 2 arms yanking her. One minute she was in her family's vegetable garden, the next she was in the back of a speeding van. Marina Chapman had just turned 5 years old when she was taken from her home in Colombia in 1955. Inside the van, there were other children whimpering and crying, and out of fear, Marina blacked out. When she came to, she realized she was being carried deep inside the Colombian jungle. Then a sound came, and the man carrying her dropped her on the ground and ran away, abandoning the girl entirely. At first, she didn't know what to do, so she dug a little hole and cuddled there for the night. It was soon clear to the young child that no one was coming back for her. She wandered around the dangerous jungle looking for sanctuary, and that's when she came across a group of capuchin monkeys. Even though the monkeys didn't care much for her at first, the little girl became fascinated with them and decided to stay close by. She then survived by mimicking what the monkeys did. She scoured food, learned to climb trees, and how to clean herself. After spending more than 4 years in the company of the animals, the little girl had lost her capacity to speak. By now she had adopted how the monkeys behaved almost entirely. She began walking on all 4s. She also learned how good it felt to be groomed and likened it to getting a massage. Years later, Marina noticed other humans, poachers, coming into the jungle. She was afraid of them, but also came across a group with women in it. They looked kind, so she decided to reveal herself to them and ask for help. The people that found her were at first shocked to see her. She was about 9 years old by this time, unkempt, naked, and had hair as long as she stood. Eventually, they brought her back to civilization, but there was still a harsh life in front of her. The little girl was sold into a brothel in the city of Calcutta. She was beaten regularly and forced to do work. However, she denied being involved in prostitution. Marina couldn't remember how long she stayed in the brothel, but life was miserable and she decided to escape. The owner, Anna Carmen, was slightly preoccupied when Marina saw her opportunity to leave. After her escape, she became homeless and banded together with other homeless children, surviving by scavenging for food, stealing money, and looking for shelter. She heard from a fellow homeless teen that she could earn money being a maid. Then she landed a job as domestic help, but picked the wrong homeowners. It turns out the family she worked for were notorious criminals. They enslaved her, and she again became a captive. During her time there, though, she met a neighbor named Maruja who took pity on the young girl. Maruja bought the girl a ticket to Bogota and arranged for her to live with her daughter. It was here Marina finally began living the life she deserved. Maruja's daughter showed Marina the love and affection she was looking for. This family had a successful textile factory and soon moved to Bradford, England, taking Marina with them. It was here she fell in love with a man named John. They married and had 2 daughters. It took a lot of convincing from her daughters for Marina to finally share her story. She worked with a ghostwriter to create a book titled The Girl with No Name. Because her story was so severe and shocking, many can't believe it happened, but it did, and Marina continues to live a normal life to this day. Number 4. Oxana Malaya. Walking on all 4s, barking and growling. These were all things Oxana Malaya did. Born on November 4th, 1983 in the Ukraine, there was nothing unusual about her birth. But as she grew, her alcoholic parents neglected her. At 3 years old, she was locked out of the house, and her instinct as a child was to find shelter from the cold. She crawled to the nearest shelter she could find, the dog kennel. Despite this, her parents didn't seem to care or even notice she was gone, and the young girl continued to live inside the kennel with the dogs. She then began adopting habits and behaviors similar to the canines. She would chew on their scraps, eat raw meat, crawl on all 4s, growl, and bark. For the next 5 years, it's believed the child was left mostly alone with the animals and had minimal human contact. Oksana did say on occasion she entered her house, but only at certain times. Essentially, because she spent her time with the dogs and identified with them, they too welcomed her into the pack. For years, the child lived in the mindset of an animal instead of a human. Finally, though, a neighbor noticed her and her behavior, took pity on her, and called the police. When authorities arrived at the home, Oksana charged at them on all fours, barking like a dog. The other animals also began barking mercilessly, yanking at their chains, hoping to protect the young girl from the police officers. The cops had to distract the other animals using meat so they could retrieve Oksana. The girl was then removed from her parents' home and brought to a place for the mentally handicapped. Doctors were scared she may have suffered too much in her time with the dogs and wondered if she would ever live like a human again, since she had forgotten to walk upright and even how to speak. However, at the orphanage, Oksana surprised them all. It took years of therapy, but she was able to walk upright again. She also learned how to speak. She learned how to eat with her hands and began living a life as a girl again instead of a dog. In 2013, Oksana was interviewed on a Ukrainian TV show and said that she gets offended when people refer to her as the dog girl. She said she simply wants to be treated the same as every other human. She also expressed her interest in finding her biological mother and having more time to spend with her brothers. Number 3. Ivan Mashukov. Known as the Siberian Dog Boy, Ivan Mashukov was the product of abandonment and neglect. He was born on May 6, 1992 in Rutov, Russia, just a year before the Soviet Union had collapsed and the new independent Russia was still reeling from its effects. The economy was bankrupt, poverty and famine was everywhere. This was the world the young boy was born into. By 1996, the situation hadn't gotten better. The economy saw little improvement. Homeless people and broken families were the standard. At 4 years old, Ivan lived with an unprepared mother and alcoholic father. The situation was so terrible that even at such a young age, Ivan decided he was better off on his own. He ended up on the cold streets of Moscow, but he did find company with a pack of stray dogs. To survive, the young boy begged for food from passerbys. Instead of eating it all for himself, though, he often shared it with the dogs. This allowed them to take a liking to him, and soon the boy became the leader of the pack. During the harsh Russian winter, with temperatures dropping as low as -10 degrees Celsius, the dogs helped Ivan to survive. They would surround the boy at night when they had to sleep, and their bodies helped the boy remain warm and protected him from the heavy snow. Aside from that, they also helped protect their new leader from any dangers on the street. For 2 years, Ivan lived and survived with his pack of stray dogs. It wasn't long before stories of the feral child began making the rounds. Police attempted to rescue the boy on 3 separate occasions, but every time his dog pack would always fight them off. The 4th time, however, they finally succeeded. They bribed and fed the stray dogs in a restaurant kitchen in order to get Ivan. The young boy, not understanding what was happening, tried to evade capture and snarled at the officers. However, he was finally taken in by authorities when he was 6 years old. Unfortunately, Ivan's mother had died 3 months prior to his rescue, so he had to stay at the Rutov Children's Center in Moscow. Aside from having lice and fleas, Ivan was in good health, and after spending 2 years with his canines, he managed to recover his speech and was reintroduced into society easily. Eventually, he was adopted into a nurturing home. He went on and studied in the military and even served in the Russian army at one point. He has continued to share and speak about his experience on Russian and Ukrainian national TV. His story has inspired several books, including Dog Boy by Eva Hornung and The Dogs of Winter by Bobby Pyron. Number 2. John Sabunya. Fleeing a life of danger and fear, at a young age, John Sabunya ran away from home and disappeared inside the Ugandan jungle. The young boy feared for his life when he witnessed his father murder his own mother. No one knows how old John was when he fled into the forest, but many believe he might have been just 3 years old. John then went on to survive by learning from monkeys. He recalled that the monkeys were initially cautious, but eventually they began to approach him, offering him nuts and sweet potatoes. Shortly after that, they allowed the boy to join them as they roamed around the jungle. They taught him how to climb trees and find food so he could survive. In 1991, a tribeswoman named Millie saw John hiding in a tree. She called over the men from the village and asked to help her rescue the boy. Like any animal, though, John resisted capture, and the monkeys he lived with also came to his rescue by throwing sticks at the villagers as they tried to take the boy away. When he was rescued, people couldn't tell if John was even human. They said he had long hair on his head and his face and body was covered in hair. His skin and body were also covered in scars. His knees were almost all white because he had been walking on them, while his nails were curled around. He was also riddled with tapeworms. John was sent to an orphanage and taught how to behave like a human again. Although he suffered from delayed mental development, he was incredibly athletic. In 1999, he ran a marathon in the Special Olympics, and in 2003, he became captain of the Ugandan Special Olympics soccer team. Aside from having a great athletic gift, John also hid another talent. He was a very good singer. He eventually joined the Pearl of Africa Children's Choir and went on to tour in the United Kingdom. Since his rescue, John was taken in by Molly and Paul Waswa, who picked July 3rd to be his official birthday. Since then, John's unusual story has continued to inspire and be shared all over the world. A BBC documentary was made about his life, and today, John is grateful for his unusual childhood years. He said even though some people wanted him dead after he was rescued for fear he was an evil spirit, he doesn't blame them for the reaction. John also said he is grateful for the monkeys because, as he put it, they made it possible for me to be loved by other people, by humans. Number 1. Jeannie. They called her Jeannie in a bid to protect her privacy. After decades of abuse and neglect inside her home in Arcadia, California, her story began in 1957 at just 20 months old. Her father was abusive, not only to the children, but also his wife. When Jeannie's older brother John was born, Jeannie's father forced his mother to keep the child quiet, preventing him from developing any linguistic capacities. 5 years after John's birth, Jeannie was born. Jeannie was healthy, but had a congenital hip dislocation and was forced to wear a splint when she was just months old. This later caused her to learn to walk late and made her father think that she was mentally retarded. Then, when Jeannie's grandmother passed away, Jeannie's father's actions became extreme. He moved the family to his mother's home and placed Jeannie in a bedroom in the back of the house while the rest of the family stayed in the living room. He would tie Jeannie down to a child's toilet for 13 hours every single day using a makeshift harness. Then at night, she was tied to a sleeping bag and placed in a crib with a metal screen over it. Anytime she made a sound, her father hit her with a large plank or made growling and barking noises to scare her. Eventually, Jeannie learned to make as little noise as possible. Her room was kept dark, and no one in the family was allowed to speak to her without the father's permission. No one was allowed to leave the house, and his son John only went to school and back. John also had to prove his identity countless times before he would be allowed back inside the house. At one point, the father said that he would let Jeannie go if she survived past the age of 12. When she did, however, he refused to let her go. It took a year and a half for her mother to find the courage to leave the home with her daughter, and by this time, John had run away from home and was living with friends. Jeannie's mother tried to apply for disability, but accidentally walked into the social services offices next door because of her blindness. The social worker said she knew immediately something was wrong when she saw Jeannie. She was even more shocked to discover Jeannie was 13 years old, not 6 or 7, which is what she looked like. Police were called in, and Jeannie's parents were then arrested. The little girl became a ward of the court, and she was taken to the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. Doctors discovered Jeannie was mostly expressionless even when experiencing an extreme emotion. She also had no sense of property or self-awareness and didn't seem to be attached to any human being, including her mother and brother. Even though a lot of people had well-meaning intentions and wanted the best for her, Jeannie's case attracted curiosity. Because of her lack of communication skills, doctors and linguists found her case intriguing, and they wanted to see whether she could develop any social skills at all. So life after her rescue was equally difficult for the girl. She was shuffled to different foster homes, including the homes of well-meaning researchers. There were often even arguments over who would gain custody over the girl. Today, Jeannie is still alive and living at a private healthcare facility in Southern California. So there were 5 shocking stories of feral children. These cases are extreme, and while they are sad, they also show that the human spirit can be hard to crush. In order to survive, these children did whatever they had to do in order to make it within their harsh environments. We have new videos coming out every Wednesday and Saturday, so please remember to subscribe to our channel because you won't want to miss out on those. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.